It's not uncommon to hear about hostages falling in love with their captors, and it's not always the beautiful, charming, bad boy type of scenario either. Sometimes it is an ordinary person taken by a group of people they would otherwise never have anything to do with. So why do some hostages fall for their captors? Stockholm Syndrome was first described in 1973 after a bank robbery in Stockholm, Sweden. 4 bank employees were taken hostage and held for 6 days. One of the hostages, a young woman named Kristen, reportedly fell in love with one of her captors and defended him in court, saying he had a good heart. In fact, she fell so hard that she married the man after his release. The term has stuck around, but there's still a lot of debate over whether or not it's a real psychological phenomenon. There is no official diagnosis in the DSM, which is the manual used by mental health professionals to diagnose mental disorders. But some researchers believe it's a trauma response. When people experience trauma, they can develop a number of responses. These are called the 4As: avoidant, compliant, aggressive, and avoidant responses involve avoiding the painful emotions associated with the trauma. Compliant responses involve going along with what the perpetrator wants in order to survive. Aggressive responses involve lashing out at the perpetrator or oneself. And associative responses involve forming a bond with the perpetrator. This last one doesn't happen with everyone, but when it does, it can result in something called a strange affection response, which is basically what Stockholm Syndrome is, where the victim develops positive feelings towards their attacker. But this isn't the only way Stockholm Syndrome can manifest itself. Victims may also show no emotions towards their attackers, or become indifferent to their fate. So why would someone develop positive feelings towards someone who is hurting them? Well, in a situation where you feel like you have no control, you have to rely on something or someone to get you through it. And if your captor is providing you with food and water, making sure you're safe and generally treating you well, then they become a source of safety for you. If you don't have any other options, you may start to associate the good things in life with your captor. This could be food, shelter, or simply not being harmed. And that could easily lead to positive feelings. On top of that, if your captor seems to have a good side, if they're friendly or funny or have a good heart, as Kristen and Mark said about her captor, then you might find yourself attracted to them because, let's face it, we're attracted to nice people. And if they're nice to you while everyone else is trying to harm you, then of course they're going to seem better than everyone else. But it's not all sunshine and roses. Some people need to use negative coping mechanisms to get through the trauma. And those coping mechanisms may include falling in love with their captor. After all, it's easier to go through a traumatic experience if you don't feel anything at all. And unfortunately, this sort of thing is more common than you might think. A study published in 2008 looked at cases in which women developed positive feelings towards their kidnappers, and of the 210 cases they studied, 14 met the criteria for what they called affectionate Stockholm Syndrome. That's almost 7% of the cases. Of course, these relationships aren't always born out of Stockholm Syndrome. Sometimes they really are just attracted to their captor. There have been numerous cases of female prisoners who have fallen in love with their jailers, and sometimes the attraction goes both ways. In 2016, a Texas prison guard was sentenced to 10 years in prison for having an inappropriate relationship with a female inmate. The two of them reportedly fell in love while the woman was incarcerated, and the guard helped her escape. So is Stockholm Syndrome a real thing? Well, there's no question that people can and do form attachments to their captors, but the jury's still out on whether or not it's actually Stockholm Syndrome. Some researchers argue that the cases of people who seem to fall in love with their captors are actually cases of something called traumatic bonding, which can happen in abusive relationships. People who experience abuse often develop a cycle of trauma, in which they escape from the abusive situation only to return to it and be traumatized all over again. This can happen over and over again, and each time the person is traumatized, they become more attached to their abuser, whether or not you want to call it Stockholm Syndrome, traumatic bonding, or something else entirely. There is no denying that some hostages do fall in love with their captors, and some of those relationships even last long after the hostage situation is over.